groundbreaking. And I just keep going to Patrick. I just thought Patrick really was the cornerstone of that movie.
Yeah, he's incredible. And getting back to your new movie, John, as well, Benched, just from watching the trailer, because obviously all we have so far is the trailer, but it seems like in the sort of the modern age, it's going to stand out a wee bit because it's a very positive movie for fathers, which is kind of it's not the biggest thing in the Hollywood agenda right now, but it's a very positive role by the looks of it. Even just the line in the trailer where you say about winning is a beautiful thing. Was that important to you? Did you think that was going to be was that part of what attracted you to it, or?
Bench is based on a play called Rounding Third, mm-hmm. And the writer Richard Dresser also wrote the screenplay. It was recently changed to Benched. And when I got the script, it was sent to me by Fred Roos, and Fred was Francis Coppola's casting person for about 30 years, and then he became a producer in his own right. And Fred's been trying to put me in something for the better part of 2 decades. And so when he sent me Benched, I just thought it was an amazing study of how men manipulate each other and how we position around each other and what we do when we're trying to manage fear and what men do to each other. It was kind of like Glengarry meets Bad News Bears. Mm-hmm. And you got to remember, the play was just a two-hander. It was just 2 guys on stage, and they would generate all the off-stage life with the dialogue. And then Richard opened it up, and Little League Baseball became a much bigger part of the movie. But I don't know if the film's even about baseball. It's more a study of men and how we kind of position and manipulate each other. That's what drew me to it. I had just done Glengarry on Broadway with Al Pacino and Bobby Cannavale, and there's some unbelievable collection, this ensemble of actors. This was 3 or 4 years ago. And Benched came along, and it reminded me that some of the core sensibilities of it reminded me of Glengarry. And I always felt that Glengarry is the greatest play for men written in our lifetime. And then when I read Richard Dresser's words in Rounding Third, aka Benched, it just totally resonated for me. The only problem is I was leaving to go down to Bogota to do the Belko experiment in about a week. And so I'm kind of a rehearsal pig. I'm a big-time rehearsal guy. I have a rehearsal space here in Los Angeles. I have all these mechanisms in place for the way I deconstruct a script, and then we put it back together, and it's almost like being an archaeologist. And I wasn't going to be able to use those because I had accepted the movie down in Bogota. And so what I did was that I rented a rehearsal space in Bogota, Colombia, and because I'm pretty light or dialogue-wise, I'm pretty light in Belko, whenever any of this ensemble, which was an incredible ensemble of actors, whenever anybody I saw they were free on a day that I was free, I just kidnapped them and took them to my rehearsal space and made them go over Benched with me. And I did this for almost 3 months, so that by the time I went to Nashville, by the way, it was 24 hours from when I wrapped Belko to when I started Benched, I was so dialed in that I got to be in a flow state. And you hear actors talk about being in a flow, or athletes being in a flow, and you can't self-generate it. You have to have come up with a rehearsal system or a practice system or a work ethic that allows a flow state to occur. You can't just step into it. And it did down in Nashville for 16 days on Benched. I was in a flow because I'd worked so goddamn hard down in Bogota getting ready to do it.
It's not just that. It's with Benched. It seems that it's this great mix of drama, and it's got that serious edge to it, but it's also sort of got jokes peppered through it as well, and it's kind of got its lighthearted moments. And that's one thing that I always sort of respect and appreciate whenever an actor can sort of meld those two together so well. Like, for example, one of my all-time favorite moments in Scrubs is whenever your character realizes that Brendan Fraser's character has passed away. It hits so much harder because it's presented in the style of a comedy.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the either top 3 or top 2 episodes we ever did. And I just thought that the way Scrubs was written and the way Bill Lawrence, who was the executive producer on it, the way he shepherded that piece, and he wasn't afraid to give you the feels, nor was the ensemble afraid to dive into that stuff. And so that one, and then the rabies one, where the 3 patients who come in with rabies, and then they have their organs. There's one patient who comes in with rabies, and then we give his organs to 3 different patients, and they all die.
I remember that one, heartbreaking
those
episode.
2 were just they were a cut above everything else.
Yeah, no show ever managed to blend sort of the comedy and then just the gut punch that Scrubs. There's so many times in Scrubs, it was just this bittersweet epic of emotions sometimes.
I think that first and foremost takes an executive producer who's not afraid to plug into that stuff. It's much easier just to write 7 jokes a page and you turn the page. It's not that hard. But if you're going to write a couple of jokes and then make somebody responsible and introduce consequences into that setting, which you kind of have to in a hospital. I guess you don't have to, but it takes some spine to do it, and he did. Yeah. And that's what separated the show.
Moving forward with Stan, I know we're looking forward now to season 3. I think it actually starts on Halloween night, which is very apt.
Yeah, season 3 starts Halloween, and it's the best season we've done. Look, if you get to run a show long enough, hopefully you learn from your mistakes or your regrets. And so every year, given the limited budget we have, we try to learn from what we did right and wrong the year before. And so now season 3 is a collection of all the stuff that we've learned that we did right and wrong. And so we brought in more guest stars this year, which we don't have the budget for, but we did. And that yields huge dividends, because there are plenty of great actors down in Atlanta, but it ain't New York and Los Angeles. It's a different group.
Is there an end game? Do you know where the series is going? Have you an idea at the minute for what the finale eventually is going to be? Or are you still just telling the story and see where it leads?
God, no. I mean, every time Dana, we were talking with Dana during Comic-Con, every season he ends the world. I always ask him, how are you going to, you painted yourself in this untenable corner, and how are you going to keep going? And then I guess it's the challenge that he likes to give to himself. And so season 2 ends at the end of the world. And now season 3 opens, and we got to get our heroes back on their feet. And the way he did it is so sublime, and he just takes ownership for it. He doesn't use any of the conventional lazy writing devices of someone waking up from a bad dream or any of this nonsense. He makes the characters own it, and it's fascinating. 301, 3rd season, 1st episode, it might be the best episode we've done, because how he gets us back from the end of the world is just astonishing.
Yeah, it's a great, because it's actually a show that whenever the first season came out, it was hardly heard of over here at all, and then when the second season came out, I kept sort of hearing people talking about it and seeing me posts on Twitter and Facebook, and then we sat down and myself and my wife just binged the whole first 2 seasons pretty much in the space of a couple of nights, which is almost unheard of for us. But it's just so great to have, I can't wait now to have your character to go back to every week, because Scrubs we always had that, and it's great obviously to see in movies and everything else, but it's so nice to have a character you can identify with.
Stan is just so binge heaven.
Yeah.
It's just, every episode's only 22 minutes and 35 seconds, and they're just little nuggets, and some are mythology episodes that kind of support the journey that Stan's on, and the mythology of the series, and I would know half of every 8, 4 are kind of one-off witch episodes, and so that seems to have become the structure we've come up with, where 4 are mythology episodes and 4 are one-off kill a witch of the week episode.
Yeah,
and so that's what we've kind of grooved into, and people are really digging that.
I do think it is quite fascinating because in today's culture, obviously, we had the vampire craze. I think now we're still deep within the zombie craze. But no one ever really touched on witches for a good long time.
Yeah.
I think that's a fascinating sort of entry point to the series.
Yeah, I agree. And then when you find out that, I mean, the whole basis of the series is that in America, when you talk about Salem's Lot and the witch burnings in Salem, there was no witch burnings in Salem. And so Dana decided that where the witch burnings were up in Willard's Mill in this fictitious New Hampshire town, and that there's a price for that, and that killing 170 odd witches comes with a price. And I love it. I love every frame of it. I think the ensemble's bulletproof. I think the Janet Varney, who plays the sheriff, is kind of a female Harrison Ford. Plus, she's wacky enough to. What we did with the second season, and certainly in the third season, is we tilted the tone of the piece when Janet was around to a little more screwball. And screwball was a style of film that Preston Sturges was doing the best in the 30s and 40s with people like Katharine Hepburn. And it dictates the construct of screwball is that the protagonist will be a female, and she'll initiate all comedy. And that's kind of what Janet does, because Stan has become a reactor. He doesn't really initiate stuff unless it's by mistake, because he just wants to sit in his chair and watch the History Channel. And so we let Janet, who can handle it, kind of take over the screwball tone of the show, which is really hard, and there's not that many people who can do it.
Yeah.
And so that's liberated us to write in a whole different direction with Janet driving, initiating the piece. And then my daughter, Deborah Baker Jr., who's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, is kind of the Jonathan Winters of her generation, the female Jonathan Winters of her generation. She's just, we've learned to put her in her own environment so that she can just riff. Because if you put her in the story, there's not enough room in the story. We had to put Deborah in circumstances where we could use more of her stuff, and we did that this year. Nate Moody, we just he's been a patient soldier for a couple seasons, and now we put some meat on the bone for him, season 3, and he's just like Barney Fife. He's like a drunk Barney Fife. He's genius.
He's a great. They're all actually brilliant. Every one of them has their, every episode gives each character a chance to shine. But we know, because we spoke to Janet before. Janet is she's so nice. She's so down to earth. She's such a lovely character. Yeah. And it's also very timely as well, John, because at the minute there is this big movement towards sort of female-led action and everything else, and you guys sort of were slightly, you were in the middle of it there, and these have led in such a great sort of ensemble of characters.
Yeah, we also lucked out with Janet. I mean, you can't do Screwball unless the protagonist, unless the actor doing it is really gifted, and Janet is. She's such a pro. It's astonishing.
After Benched, is there anything else that you have coming up as well as Stan, or are you working on anything else at the minute?
Well, my friend Paul Sanchez, who played the medic in Platoon, did a documentary about the making of Platoon, and he got everybody to come in and talk to him, from Johnny Depp to Tom Berenger to Willem, myself, pretty much everybody. And he did this documentary about how we made the movie, and I think that comes out later in the fall. I've seen it. It's astonishing. It's called Brothers in Arms.
Brothers in Arms. We'll keep an eye out on that. And will that be? Do you think will it be getting a theatrical release, or will it be a sort of?
Oh yeah.
It will be getting.
The documentary used to have a short life, and it'll be in theaters for a second, and then it'll be on all these different content providers.
Well, listen, all we can say is that it's been an absolute delight speaking to you today. As I say, we've been big fans. I've been a big fan of yours ever since. Sort of like Point Break and Highlander 2 and stuff. We're delighted that you're still here with Stan and everything else, that you're still there every week, because whenever Scrubs ended, it was, our life was emptier without Dr.
Very
Cox.
Very much so.
That was a good run. We had a good run with that show.
One thing I've always kind of wanted to ask you, have you ever bumped into Hugh Laurie and just went, I got there before you?
No, but the New York Times said that in their review. So I feel like that kind of that just set the table, since we started a year and a half before them. But I've never met you. I have profound respect for him, so I don't have any. I mean, he can. God damn, is he a good actor? Holy cow!
Yeah, because remember for a while he was the fan favourite to be cast in Doctor Who as the lead, and I remember thinking at the time that would have been an inspired bit of casting.
I didn't know that, but he would have torn the cover off of Doctor Who.